Let's run through what's happening, what's happened, and any other juicy tidbits you have. Good morning.
Good morning, Dan. Well, I think the first bomb to drop today was Mike Shanahan, right? I mean, I get the sense over the last couple of weeks he really has a desire to get back in, and that, the Niners interview last year, got his juices flowing. I think that ownership had a real interest in hiring him and was talked out of it. And, I think the success of the Redskins only added to that. So to me, that's the first big bomb to drop, that he'll be interviewing with the Dolphins tomorrow. And, like I said, over the last couple of weeks, I've really gotten a sense that he wants back in. And you look at a lot of the things he did in Washington, and it didn't end well. There's no question about that. But he was right about Kirk Cousins, and there are a lot of guys in that team that were brought in by him. In his first two draft picks, Trent Williams and Ryan Kerrigan just signed huge deals, so they've obviously worked out. And the RG3 trade obviously was a dumpster fire, but other than that, he did a lot of good things there.
You've also pointed out, you tweeted that it feels like San Diego and St. Louis will keep their respective coaches.
Yeah, and the Rams are going to keep their structure in place because the focus right now over the next 2 weeks is getting the 24 votes that they need to go to Los Angeles, getting the Inglewood project going, and so they don't feel like this is an ideal environment to run a coach search in. And Jeff Fisher's been through this before. He went through this with the Oilers in the 90s when they were nomads. They were in Houston as a lame duck for a year, then went to Memphis, then went to Nashville. So he's been through this type of process before, and they think that'll help. And then, with the Chargers, I think it was the same sort of thing. So much of their focus is going to go into what's going to happen with the franchise over the next few weeks. And, who are they going to L.A. with? Will it be in Carson? Will it be in Inglewood? Where will they play on a temporary basis if they do go next year? So for both those franchises, I think the mindset is we ought to focus on the business side of things for now. And we'd really be shortchanging the football side if we were trying to run a coach search while we're doing the whole L.A. deal.
What happens with the Giants?
I think Tom Coughlin resigns today. And if not today, in the next couple of days. That organization, I don't think, is going to outright fire him. And I don't think that he's completely lost the desire to coach. So I don't think it's impossible that he resurfaces somewhere else.
But Albert,
I can tell you that's
would they let him go if they don't know who his successor is going to be?
I think so. I mean, I think the one thing that would give them some hesitation here, they have a guy on staff in Ben McAdoo who's done a great job with Eli Manning over the last couple of years, and really getting Eli Manning through a tough stretch, and it was similar to the stretch that Phillip Rivers had a couple of years in San Diego, where throwing a lot of interceptions and working through some things with some new weapons around him, and he's come out of that, and Eli's had a pretty good 2-year stretch here, and so I think they look at Ben McAdoo and they say, okay, is this guy ready to be a head coach? Maybe not. But we really like the way things have worked here, and that complicates things to some degree because when you're looking at bringing in a new coach, then that guy's going to want to bring his own guys in there. And now are you messing with your $20+ million per year investment in your quarterback? So it's a little complicated for the Giants. I think they'd like to stick with Jerry Reese as the general manager. The one thing that's overriding there, though, I mean, the ownership in the Maras is thought of as highly as any ownership group in the NFL and the coaching community. And I think most coaches view that job as the brass ring. And so if a David Shaw was going to leave Stanford, or if a Pat Fitzgerald was going to leave Northwestern, or if a Nick Saban was going to leave Alabama, that'd be one of the few jobs they do it for. And I think the Giants are well aware of that.
He's Albert Breer. You can follow him on a busy day on Twitter at Albert Breer. NFL Network providing live coverage of all the latest news from around the league throughout the day today. The Colts situation?
Yeah, Pagano, I think, is going to be gone in midday today. And then, that kind of opens things up because, I think they've been operating it's been a high-pressure environment in Indianapolis over the last year. The owner, and this is all painted by the owner's attitude about what happened during the Peyton Manning years, obviously disappointed they only got one championship and resolved to not let that happen again with Andrew Luck. And I think he understands that he's got a chip right now to go and get, a coach who is very high profile. And so whether that's Sean Payton or Nick Saban, I think he wants to hit a home run with this head coach hire. And so the first piece of that, of course, would be firing Chuck Pagano, which they don't really have to do because his contract's up anyway. So they just say, okay, we're going to part ways. And then I think the fate of the general manager, Ryan Grigson, rides on who the next head coach is. And I think the easiest way to kind of phrase what I think will happen there is I don't think that Jim Irsay is going to let Ryan Grigson stand in the way of whoever the next head coach is. So if Sean Payton or Nick Saban says, I want my own personnel guy there, I think Grigson would be gone. I think if it's somebody who's willing to work with Grigson, Grigson could stay. Similar to the Scott Pioli situation a couple of years ago in Kansas City when they fired Romeo Crennel. They held on to Scott Pioli for a few days, and then Andy Reid came in and brought John Dorsey with him.
The Brown situation is, well, it's the Brown situation. And now with the Johnny Manziel caveat added to this here, I'm guessing nobody is back in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, their structure is going to be a lot different next year. And it's hard to say what's going to happen with the quarterback when you don't know who the head coach is going to be and you don't know who the personnel chief's going to be. But their structure is going to be very, very different. They're going with, a guy who's worked the cap side for them the last few years in Sashi Brown, who's respected on that end, but doesn't have very much experience evaluating players. And they're going to give him oversight over the personnel department. So whoever the next personnel chief is going to report to him. And then they want the next coach to be the face of the franchise. And they're going to allow that coach to report directly to the owner, which will give him a little more power. But the 53 is going to belong to Sashi Brown, which I think has certainly raised some eyebrows in the scouting community. And so I think the next question you got to ask with the Browns, and they'd love to bring in an Adam Gase, and I know Adam Gase thinks highly of the owner, and they've got a relationship there. I think the next question you have to ask here is that, does this structure make it more difficult to hire the guys that you want as a general manager and the head coach? Because they look at it and they say, this, the franchise has got a bad history over the last half decade. There's no debating that. And now they've put an analytics guy in charge of the personnel department, and there's been power struggles there in the past, and this guy clearly has the owner's ear. So that's really the next question, I think, is that have you really shortened your pool of candidates, both for the personnel chief job and for the coaching job, because you've put a numbers guy in charge of the football operation?
Does Manziel want to be released?
It's funny because everything that Johnny does fits right into the narrative, right? I mean, absolutely everything he does fits right into what everybody wants to say about him.
It feels calculated, Albert.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, even like you go back to like the rolled up dollar bill in the bathroom in Vegas, right? Like that's almost like a guy like with his buddies there saying like, "Hey, look, watch how this blows up." You know what I mean? Like he's messing with everybody. So it feels that way, and I'll be interested to see what happens with the next coach who's not invested in him, the next personnel chief who's not invested in him. I think it usually makes sense to give first-round quarterbacks as much time as you possibly can because you don't want to be going through this sort of stuff just to watch a guy flourish somewhere else. But he's really tried everybody in that building's patience. And for as much growth as he showed inside those walls, and he did, between April and December. I mean, he was a good soldier when he was in the building. He's still very clearly shown that he can't handle himself properly outside the building to the point where, like you said, it almost looks like he's messing with everybody.
I know you have a busy day. Albert, thanks for joining us. Good luck today.
You got it, Dan.